Stargate Voyager.
A mysterious craft pulled from the Japanese coastline in 1803. The new discovery of an incredible ancient artifact found at Gobekli Tepe and an old 1903 report I found in the digital archives of the Library of Congress that talks about a strange skeleton that was pulled from an Oregon grave. These are the topics we are going to dive into in this episode. But first, I just want to remind everybody to subscribe to this podcast from wherever you are watching it or listening, whether that's Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Hit the subscribe button if you can, and even better, leave me a 5-star rating. That's right, a 5-star rating. This helps me to break through the algorithms, climb the charts, and in turn help more people to find this podcast. And hopefully in turn, I awaken more minds to our amazing ancient history. So in February of 1803, local fishermen working off the coast of Japan spotted a strange vessel aimlessly floating on the waves off in the distance. Intrigued by its small size and strange shape, the fishermen decided to tow it ashore. Once upon the beach, the local villagers marveled at the seemingly advanced engineering that the vessel possessed. It appeared to resemble a spinning top. It measured approximately 11 feet tall by 18 feet wide. The bottom half was made of some type of heavy metal, while the upper portion was made of lacquered rosewood with glass-looking windows. As the villagers inspected the vessel more closely, another surprise awaited them. Suddenly, the hatch opened with a clamor to reveal a mysterious-looking woman. Standing about 5 feet tall, she featured pale white skin and red hair with white highlighted tips. She was of unknown origin and spoke an unknown language. As the fishermen and villagers peered inside the vessel, they saw what looked like water containers and other supplies that led them to believe the woman had planned a long voyage. Markings could also be seen on the interior walls of the craft. But strangest of all, the woman held tight to a wooden box, which she refused to let go of. As the story goes, a local elder was there who recalled hearing of a similar incident in a nearby town that took place years prior. This elder wondered if this woman was a foreign princess exiled for possibly defying an arranged marriage and choosing true love instead. He theorized that her lover had possibly been executed, and therefore she had been banished to floating the sea. Hearing of this, the villagers began to wonder if her lover's severed head was inside the box. The elder then advised the villagers it was best to send her back to the sea in the vessel. And so they did just that. They encouraged the woman to get back in the vessel. They closed up the hatch, and the fishermen and villagers pushed the craft or the ship out to sea, leaving the pale-skinned woman inside to the destiny of the tossing waves. Now, this story is known as the Utsuro-bune legend. Utsuro-bune stands for hollow or vacant ship, according to the Japanese language. And it appears in at least 12 literary sources from what's called the late Edo period of between 1603 and 1868, I believe. Now, a Japanese historian known as Yakti Bakin investigated these claims in 1844 and believed the woman's description bore a striking resemblance to fashion and hairstyles from Russia in the late 1700s. He based these observations on the testimony of someone known as Dakayu Kiyao, a Japanese castaway who had lived in Russia in the late 1700s and wrote about it. Some have speculated that the unique hairstyle the woman wore was actually possibly made of animal fur or fur interwoven with her hair braids. Others have theorized that this story was a more modern retelling of an older legend known as the origin of the Kona clan. This legend tells of a 7th century fisherman who found a 13-year-old girl floating in a boat in the sea. The girl revealed herself to be the daughter of the Chinese emperor who was fleeing her evil stepmother. She later married a prince from Hanover province, and their son became the founder of the Kona clan. Was the Utsuro-bune legend influenced by this story? Now, despite the historical connections that can possibly be made here, some theorize that the answer to this story lies not in earthly traditions, but in outer space. Two reasons for this theory would be the odd shape of the vessel and the symbols that were seen inside the craft. Now, the illustrations we have from the 1800s that depict this craft or this vessel show that it appears to resemble a flying saucer, or what we would call a flying saucer or UFO in today's lingo, a shape that would not become widely known until the 20th century. There does not seem to be any type of seafaring vessel we know of from this period of Japanese history that matches the strange shape described in these accounts. Also, the symbols that were found inside the craft supposedly did not match any known alphabet from Russia or Ukraine or wherever this woman might possibly have come from. Now, Tanaka Kazao, professor emeritus at Gifu University, has studied this Utsuro-bune legend for many, many years. In fact, he was so enamored by this story that he left his main area of research to study this legend. And I found an interesting comment he made. He states, quote, "Long before the American UFO stories, the craft depicted in Edo period Japanese documents for some reason looked like a flying saucer. This was fascinating to me. Having a story like this in Japan from 140 years before the American UFO sightings that stimulates the imagination to this extent reminds me of how deep and fascinating Japanese culture can be," end quote. This mysterious legend and really documented account continues to puzzle researchers today. So I want to know from you guys, was the vessel and this woman from some distant culture like Russia from the 1700s that somehow was pushed out to sea for some reason and ended up in Japan? Or do you think this woman and this craft was something else, possibly something otherworldly altogether? Leave me a comment if you can. If you're watching on YouTube, leave me a comment. If you are watching or listening via Spotify, respond to the poll I have up in this episode that asks this question. So we have another new exciting discovery of an ancient artifact at Gobekli Tepe. And man, there has been a lot of discoveries coming out of Gobekli Tepe lately. If you don't know, Gobekli Tepe means potbelly hill in Turkish. And this site is really one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in recent decades. This site is most famous for its 15 plus foot tall, 50-ton T-shaped pillars that emerge out of the ground made of limestone. But this site continues to reveal incredible artifacts. And this, despite the controversy, according to Jimmy Corsetti and others, Hugh Newman's talked about it, who are saying that the powers that be that control the site of Gobekli Tepe are only excavating a very small percentage of the site. In fact, I did an episode that hit on this last month. I believe the title had something in it about cover up at Gobekli Tepe, where I talked about some of the research, again, that Jimmy Corsetti and Hugh Newman have done, where they are saying that the powers that be purposely do not want to excavate this incredible site to its full extent. And they've even gone on record, the authorities that be, as saying as much, that they want to save it for another generation to excavate. And so the $1 million question is, why would they come to this conclusion that they don't want to fully excavate this site now? With the incredible technology we have, we can excavate and we can carefully extract artifacts like no other generation before with the incredible technology we have. But it doesn't seem like they want to. Again, this is according to Jimmy Corsetti and others. I would encourage you to go to his Twitter feed where he documents this all, or go to his YouTube channel where he's put out several videos of late breaking down why he believes there's a cover up at Gobekli Tepe. Okay, so with that information out of the way, with the little bit of excavations they do seem to be doing, we have an incredible discovery of an artifact. And if you are watching on YouTube or Spotify, you're going to see photos of this artifact. This is a life-sized wild boar statue, and it's now on display at the Şanlıurfa Museum there in Turkey. This ancient artifact is estimated to be at least 11,000 years old. There's black and white pigments of color that can still be seen on the statue's surface, and the tongue of the wild boar still has red pigment color on it. Fascinating. Now, for as ancient as this statue supposedly is, and again, the experts estimate that it is 11,000 years old. And imagine the cataclysms this thing has been through, the weathering, yet it still features stunning detail. The tusks, the tongue, teeth. You can see a spine running down its back. And this wild boar statue just has a very ferocious appearance. Now, author and researcher Andrew Collins pointed out in a video that Megalithomania and Hugh Newman did that had some really great information, and I'll link that video in the show notes. Andrew Collins points out that there appears to be something that the wild boar is clutching between its feet or its hooves. Andrew theorizes that this is an abstract human head, and he believes the boar represented like the transition of the person's spirit from the present world to the next world. So the boar, therefore, he believes, is symbolic of releasing the human spirit to go on its proper journey to the afterlife. But this is an incredible discovery for sure, and I cannot wait to get to Turkey and see this artifact in the Şanlıurfa Museum. As I stated earlier, there's been several recent discoveries of other ancient artifacts at Gobekli Tepe and its sister site, Karahan Tepe, really just in the last year and the year prior. At Karahan Tepe, a 7'6" humanoid-looking statue was discovered earlier this year, I believe. And although it's, again, damaged by the ages, this thing also is estimated to be 10,000 plus years old. It features stunning detail with a facial expression and eyes, nose, ribs, and a phallus. And if you're watching via YouTube or Spotify, you're going to see photos of this and see the humanoid is grabbing onto its phallus. It's got detailed looking hands, ribs, but a very strange looking face and head. From its side profile, the head even seems to be slightly elongated, or maybe it's wearing almost a helmet, or it's possible he had an ancient mullet, but you can see how it goes down in the back. But an incredible discovery was this 7'6" tall humanoid looking statue depicting some ancient hybrid, as some might say a Nephilim, possibly from Genesis 6:4. It's interesting to consider. Again, one thing is for certain, Gobekli Tepe is one of the most significant, important ancient sites on the planet, and it continues to reveal incredible artifacts. All right, so we'll end this episode talking about a strange 1903 article or newspaper article that I found in the digital archives of the Library of Congress. Searching through the digital archives of the Library of Congress has kind of become a hobby of mine when I have extra time. And anybody really can do this. From the website, you just put in specific keywords and it will search the database from the late 1700s all the way to the 1960s, I believe. And all kinds of interesting articles pop up. And this is one that I just came across last week. This article comes from the Daily Journal publication in Salem, Oregon, dated March 3rd, 1903. And I will link this article that links to the Library of Congress original newspaper so that you guys can see it yourself and see I'm not making this up. I didn't write this. This is literally from the US government's online library. The article is headlined, quote, "Found a strange skeleton," end quote. And now I'll literally read verbatim from this article. Quote, "A correspondent of the East Oregonian at Pendleton writes about an interesting find of a skeleton on Tom Atkinson's place near the stage crossing on McKay's Creek, about 10 miles south of Pendleton. For the last 30 or 40 years, there has been a peculiar pile of rocks on the place, and last Wednesday, Mr. Adkins and Dick Baker thought they would see what was under the rocks. They found the rocks were piled in a hole the shape of a grave. The rocks were as large as a man could lift. After going through about 3 feet of this rock, they found the skeleton of a man. It was that of a short, heavy-set man, but very large bones. The jawbone was exceptionally large, with wide teeth. The bones from the elbows out and from the knees down were missing. The joints of the backbone were as large as that of a yearling steer. But the queerest part of all was the skull. Instead of being smooth on either side of the head were small horns about 1 1/2 inches long." End quote. So what in the heck was this? Were these just the bones of some cow? If it was a cow, why would it be buried in what looked like an ancient important grave with rocks piled up? If it was just cow bones, why does the article say, quote, "They found the skeleton of a man," end quote, and that it was actually a short, heavy-set man? Again, the article mentions that the skeleton had very large bones, that the jawbone was exceptionally large, and that it had wide teeth. It mentions how the joints of the backbone were as large as that of a yearling steer. Now, I'm no farmer, but I'm guessing that the bones of a yearling steer are quite thick. But obviously, the most bizarre part of this story is how it describes this skeleton as having small horns protruding off the sides of the skull that were about 1 1/2 inches long. What in the heck do you guys think this was? Do you think this was just some cow and that these guys who found it were just out of their minds? Or do you think they stumbled upon some strange ancient humanoid or hybrid of sorts? Some might say chimera. So what in the world was this? Well, one thing is for certain, this earth, this world, this planet is a very, very strange place. And I believe there's far more to our history than we have been led to believe. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, a reminder to subscribe to this podcast from wherever you like to watch or listen. Feel free to connect with me on social media at Stargate Voyager on TikTok, X, Instagram, all the places. And until next time, keep exploring.